This is Book 7 of John Dryden's translation of the Aeneid, and we are officially entering the second half of the book. So I'm going to start showing you a map of Aeneas' journey so far because we are finally getting to their destined home. So the journey of Aeneas, not the Aeneid itself, but his journey starts in Troy, and once Troy is sacked, they leave to go build their fleet, and they go up, if you look on the right side, to Aeneia, which is where they find the soul of Polydor, and they decide to leave very quickly after they bury him properly. They go down to Ortygia, which would be Delos, and they consult the prophet there, and he redirects them to their native soil. That's where they need to go, where their ancestors are from. Well, Aeneas' father, Anchises, says, "Oh, that's Crete. We're from Crete." And so they go down to Pergama, there on Crete. They build the city and live there for a year. And after a year of plagues, they're not sure what to do. So Aeneas is warned by the Penates, his household gods, to continue, that it's actually Italy that they need to go to. And so they do. On their way to Italy, they encounter the Harpies, who give them the prophecy about eating their plates. They avoid the land of Ithaca, and then they go up to Betrotum, there above Ithaca, and they meet Helenus and Andromache. And Helenus, remember, is the prophet of Apollo as well, and so they get lots of tips from him. Following that, they slowly make their way to Italy, and so you can see they go up kind of between the gap in Italy and Sicily, and that's where Scylla and Charybdis are, and so they avoid that, make their way around the coast of Sicily, and in Acesta, Eric's there, and Chryses dies. After they leave, they go toward their destined home, but Juno blows them off course with a storm, which is where Book 1 starts, and they end up in Carthage. So Carthage would be all that happens with Dido in Book 1 and in Book 4. And after their dealings with Dido, they go back to Eric's Acesta, have the funeral games, and that is where Book 5 leaves off. In Book 6, they go to Cumae, and it's there that Aeneas travels to the underworld with the Sibyl. So now this is Book 7, and they're going to end up in Latium, where they've been headed this whole book. And if you look in the top right of this map, you can see all of the tribes that are mentioned are just scattered in the area, and we won't worry too much about the geography at all. But just to realize they're all close together, and a lot of tribes and leaders of tribes will be mentioned in this second half of the epic. So, without further ado, let's set up Book 7. Book 7 will start with the Trojans landing at Latium. The king there, King Latinus, will welcome Aeneas and promise him his daughter Lavinia's hand in marriage. After this, Juno will send the Fury Alecto to rouse war and delay Aeneas' peace through various methods. Turnus, a local prince who was going to marry Lavinia, will lead the people to war against the Trojans. And finally, the forces of Turnus and his allies will be named and detailed. This is Book 7 of the Aeneid by Virgil, translated by John Dryden. The very first line references the last lines of Book 6, so I will start with those. Straight to the ships Aeneas took his way, embarked his men, and skimmed along the sea, still coasting till he gained Caieta's bay. At length on oozy ground his galleys moor, their heads are turned to sea, their sterns to shore. And thou, O matron of immortal frame, here dying to the shore hast left thy name. Caieta still the place is called from thee, the nurse of great Aeneas' infancy. Here rest thy bones in rich Hesperia's plains. Thy name, it is all a ghost can have, remains. Now when the prince her funeral rites had paid, he ploughed the Tyrrhene seas with sails displayed. From land a gentle breeze arose by night. Serenely shone the stars, the moon was bright, and the sea trembled with her silver light. Now near the shelves of Circe's shores they run, Circe the rich, the daughter of the sun, a dangerous coast. The goddess wastes her days in joyous songs, the rocks resound her lays. In spinning o'er the loom she spends the night, and cedar brands supply her father's light. From hence were heard, rebellowing to the main, the roars of lions that refuse the chain, the grunts of bristled boars, and groans of bears, and herds of howling wolves that stun the sailors' ears. These from their caverns at the close of night fill the sad isle with horror and affright. Darkling they mourn their fate, whom Circe's power, that watched the moons and planetary hour, with words and wicked herbs from humankind had altered, and in brutal shapes confined. Which monsters lest the Trojans' pious host should bear, or touch upon the enchanted coast, propitious Neptune steered their course by night with rising gales that sped their happy flight. Supplied with these, they skim in sounding shore, and hear the swelling surges vainly roar. Now when the rosy morn began to rise, and waved her saffron streamer through the skies, when Thetis blushed in purple not her own, and from her face the breathing winds were blown, a sudden silence sat upon the sea, and sweeping oars with struggling urged their way. The Trojan from the main beheld a wood, which thick with shades and a brown horror stood. Betwixt the trees the Tiber took his course, with whirlpools dimpled, and with downward force that drove the sand along he took his way, and rolled his yellow billows to the sea. About him and above and round the wood the birds that haunt the borders of his flood, that bathed within or basked upon his side, to tuneful songs their narrow throats applied. The captain gives command. The joyful train glide through the gloomy shade and leave the main. Now, Eretto, thy poet's mind inspire, and fill his soul with thy celestial fire. Relate what Latium was, her ancient kings, declare the past and present state of things, when first the Trojan fleet Ausonia sought, and how the rivals loved, and how they fought. These are my theme, and how the war began, and how concluded by the godlike man. For I shall sing of battles, blood, and rage, which princes and their people did engage, and haughty souls that moved with mutual hate, and fighting fields pursued, and found their fate, that roused the Tyrrhene realm with loud alarms, and peaceful Italy involved in arms. A larger scene of action is displayed, and rising hence, a greater work is weighed. So Book 7 starts with Aeneas paying funeral rites to his old nurse, and they set off, and everything's great. They avoid Circe's island. Circe is the minor goddess witch who turns men into different animals, and so the Trojans can hear all of these animal sounds coming from her island, and it scares them, and so they try to avoid it, and Neptune helps them on their way. And it's the next day, and they're struggling to go forward, and finally they hit land. And they arrive at this gloomy wood in this bay, and Virgil asks at this point for Eretto, the muse, to inspire him, because according to him, the action of this half of the story is greater. A greater work is weighed, is how this section ends. And all the things that are going to happen, this war that's going to happen, and how the heroes will fight on the battle, all of the blood and rage and hate. He's about to sing of the most important part of the story. And so he will, continuing on line 68. Latinus, old and mild, had long possessed the Latin scepter, and his people blessed. His father Faunus, a Laurentian dame his mother, fair Marica was her name. But Faunus came from Picus. Picus drew his birth from Saturn, if records be true. Thus King Latinus in the 3rd degree had Saturn author of his family. But this old peaceful prince, as heaven decreed, was blessed with no male issue to succeed. His sons in blooming youth were snatched by fate. One only daughter heired the royal state. Fired with her love, and with ambition led, the neighboring princes court her nuptial bed. Among the crowd, but far above the rest, young Turnus to the beauteous maid addressed. Turnus, from high descent and graceful mien, was first, and favoured by the Latian queen. With him she strove to join Lavinia's hand, but dire portents the purposed match withstand. Deep in the palace of long growth there stood a laurel's trunk, a venerable wood, where rites divine were paid. whose holy hair was kept and cut with superstitious care. This plant Latinus, when his town he walled, then found, and from the tree Laurentum called, and last, in honor of his new abode, he vowed the laurel to the laurel's god. It happened once, a boding prodigy, a swarm of bees that cut the liquid sky, unknown from whence they took their airy flight, upon the topmost branch in clouds alight. There with their clasping feet together clung, and a long cluster from the laurel hung. An ancient augur prophesied from hence, Behold, on Latian shores a foreign prince! From the same parts of heaven his navy stands, to the same parts on earth his army lands. The town he conquers, and the tower commands. Yet more, when fair Lavinia fed the fire before the gods, and stood beside her sire, strange to relate, the flames involved in smoke of incense from the sacred altar broke, caught her dishevelled hair and rich attire. Her crown and jewels crackled in the fire. From thence the fuming trail began to spread, and lambent glories danced about her head. This new portent the seer with wonder views, then pausing, thus his prophecy renews. The nymph, who scatters flaming fires around, shall shine with honor, shall herself be crowned. But, caused by her irrevocable fate, war shall the country waste, and change the state. Latinus, frighted with his dire ostent, for counsel to his father Faunus went, and sought the shades renowned for prophecy, which near Albunia's sulphurous fountain lie. To these the Latian and the Sabine land fly, when distressed, and thence relief demand. The priest on skins of offerings takes his ease, and nightly visions in his slumber sees. A swarm of aerial shapes appears, and fluttering round his temples deafs his ears. These he consults, the future fates to know, from powers above, and from the fiends below. Here for the gods' advice Latinus flies, offering 100 sheep for sacrifice. Their woolly fleeces, as the rites required, he laid beneath him, and to rest retired. No sooner were his eyes in slumber bound, when from above a more than mortal sound invades his ears, and thus the vision spoke. Seek not, my seed, in Latian bands to yoke our fair Lavinia, nor the gods provoke. A foreign son upon thy shore descends, whose martial fame from pole to pole extends. His race in arms and arts of peace renowned, not Latium shall contain, nor Europe bound. It is theirs whate'er the sun surveys around. These answers in the silent night received, the king himself divulged, the land believed. The fame through all the neighboring nations flew, when now the Trojan navy was in view. All right, so there is an old Latin king in Italy named Latinus, and he is descended from the Titan Saturn, the father of Jupiter. And Latinus only has one child, a daughter. All of his sons died when they were young, and so all of the princes around want to marry Lavinia, his daughter, because they can get power by it and because she's beautiful, of course. And the foremost of these is a young man named Turnus, who the queen, who will learn is Amata, really likes. Unfortunately for Turnus, deep in the palace there is this plant, a sacred plant that Latinus found when he was building up the town. And there was a time when, strangely, a swarm of bees landed on the plant and then kind of hung off of it in a line in a really strange fashion. And so the augur, who interprets these kinds of things, says, a foreign prince is going to come and conquer your lands. And then on top of that, as this is going on, Lavinia feeds the fire, and the smoke wraps around her head much like a crown. And then the lambent glories dance around. This should seem familiar. And the nymph here in 117 is referring to a beautiful young woman. So this is Lavinia, and she shall be crowned, but when she is, it's going to cause this awful war that's going to change the course of your country. So Latinus is freaked out by this, and he goes to seek counsel from the prophets and powers that be, and he hears this prophecy that Lavinia is not to marry somebody from Italy, someone from this area, but she's supposed to marry a foreigner whose martial fame, his military prowess, is widely known, and whose descendants will control a whole lot of the world, bigger than Latium in Italy, and even into Europe. And he is amazed by this. He tells everybody, and then, wouldn't you know it, the Trojan navy arrives. So, we'll see how this goes. Line 151. Beneath a shady tree the hero spread his table on the turf with cakes of bread, and with his chiefs on forest fruits he fed. They sat, and, not without the gods' command, their homely fare dispatched, the hungry band invade their trenchers next, and soon devour, to mend the scanty meal, their cakes of flour. Ascanius this observed, and smiling said, See, we devour the plates on which we fed. The speech had omen, that the Trojan race should find repose, and this the time and place. Aeneas took the word, and thus replies, confessing fate with wonder in his eyes. All hail, O earth, all hail, my household gods! Behold the destined place of your abodes! For thus Anchises prophesied of old, and this our fatal place of rest foretold. When on a foreign shore, instead of meat by famine forced, your trenchers you shall eat, then ease your weary Trojans will attend, and the long labors of your voyage end. Remember on that happy coast to build, and with a trench enclose the fruitful field. This was that famine, this the fatal place which ends the wandering of our exiled race. Then on tomorrow's dawn your care employ to search the land, and where the cities lie, and what the men, but give this day to joy. Now pour to Jove, and after Jove is blessed, call great Anchises to the genial feast. Crown high the goblets with a cheerful draught. Enjoy the present hour, adjourn the future thought. Thus having said, the hero bound his brows with leafy branches, then performed his vows, adoring first the genius of the place, then Earth, the mother of the heavenly race, the nymphs and native godheads yet unknown, and night, and all the stars that gild her sable throne, and ancient Sibyl, and Idaean Jove, and last his sire below, and mother queen above. Then heaven's high monarch thundered thrice aloud, and thrice he shook aloft a golden cloud. Soon through the joyful camp a rumor flew, the time was come their city to renew. Then every brow with cheerful green is crowned, the feasts are doubled, and the bowls go round. When next the rosy morn disclosed the day, the scouts to several parts divide their way, to learn the natives' names, their towns explore, the coasts and trendings of the crooked shore. Here Tiber flows, and here Numicus stands, here warlike Latins hold the happy lands. The pious chief, who sought by peaceful ways to found his empire, and his town to raise, 100 youths from all his train selects, and to the Latian court their course directs, the spacious palace where their prince resides, and all their heads with wreaths of olive hides. They go commissioned to require a peace, and carry presents to procure access. Thus while they speed their pace, the prince designs his new elected seat, and draws the lines. The Trojans round the place a rampire cast, and palisades about the trenches placed. Meantime the train, proceeding on their way, from far the town and lofty tower survey, at length approach the walls. Without the gate they see the boys and Latian youth debate the martial prizes on the dusty plain. Some drive the cars, and some the coursers rein. Some bend the stubborn bow for victory, and some with darts their active sinews try. A posting messenger, dispatched from hence, of this fair troop, advised their aged prince that foreign men of mighty stature came, uncouth their habit, and unknown their name. The king ordains their entrance, and ascends his regal seat, surrounded by his friends. So the Trojans have arrived, and they know they've arrived because, without thinking, they ate their platters. And if you remember, the queen of the Harpies forecasted, and we're told here that Anchises also prophesied that when they find themselves eating their plates, which in this case are just cakes of flour, that is when they'll know they've arrived at their destined home. And Anchises adds in his prophecy that they should remember to build a trench to enclose the fruitful field. And so, realizing that they have come to their destined home, Aeneas is excited and he blesses the day and he has everybody celebrate that they've finally arrived, that their troubles are finally at an end. And so he blesses and praises all the gods that he can think of, and they get this good omen from Jove in the process, that they see this golden cloud. So the next morning, Aeneas sends out some scouts to see what the land is like and what the people are like. He sends them especially to the Latian court where Latinus is. Of course, they don't know that yet. And they're going there to require, or in this case, request, a peace. And while they're doing that, Aeneas is back and he's thinking about his new home and he's drawing the lines for the walls. And the Trojans are building up their own walls and the palisades, their fences, and their trenches as well. So the train goes in, and they see all of the Latian youth doing these games, much like they did, driving around in chariots and racing on horseback and shooting with the bow. So literally what they just finished doing not too long ago, they see these Latians doing. A messenger sees the Trojans and quickly goes and tells King Latinus, hey, there's these foreign men in their uncouth habit, their strange foreign clothes, and I don't know exactly who they are. But the king, knowing the prophecy, suspects something, most likely, and welcomes them as friends. Picking up line 229. The palace built by Picus, vast and proud, supported by 100 pillars stood, and round encompassed with a rising wood. The pile o'erlooked the town, and drew the sight, surprised at once with reverence and delight. There kings received the marks of sovereign power, in state the monarchs marched, the lictors bore their awful axes and their rods before. Here the tribunal stand, the house of prayer, and here the sacred senators repair. All at large tables in long order set, a ram their offering and a ram their meat. Above the portal, carved in cedar wood, placed in their ranks, their godlike grandsires stood. Old Saturn with his crooked scythe on high, and Italus that led the colony, and ancient Janus with his double face and bunch of keys, the porter of the place. There good Sabinus, planter of the vines, on a short pruning hook his head reclines, and studiously surveys his generous wines. Then warlike kings, who for their country fought, and honorable wounds from battle brought. Around the posts hung helmets, darts, and spears, and captive chariots, axes, shields, and bars, and broken beaks of ships, the trophies of their wars. Above the rest, as chief of all the band, was Picus placed, a buckler in his hand, his other waved the long divining wand. Girt in his gabing gown the hero sate, yet could not with his art avoid his fate, for Circe long had loved the youth in vain, till love refused converted to disdain. Then mixing powerful herbs with magic art, she changed his form, who could not change his heart, constrained him in a bird, and made him fly with party-colored plumes, a chattering pie. In this high temple, on a chair of state, the seat of audience, old Latinus sate. Then gave admission to the Trojan train, and thus with pleasing accents he began. Tell me, ye Trojans, for that name you own, nor is your course upon our coasts unknown. Say what you seek, and whither were you bound? Were you by stress or weather cast aground? Such dangers as on seas are often seen, and oft befall to miserable men. Or come your shipping in our ports to lay, spent and disabled in so long a way? Say what you want. The Latians you shall find not forced to goodness, but by will inclined. For since the time of Saturn's holy reign, his hospitable customs we retain. I call to mind, but time the tale is worn, the Arunci told that Dardanus, though born on Latian plains, yet sought the Phrygian shore, and Samothracia, Samos called before. From Tuscan court to whom he claimed his birth, but after, when exempt from mortal earth, from thence ascended to his kindred skies, a god, and as a god augments their sacrifice. He said, Ilioneus made this reply, O king of Faunus' royal family, nor wintry winds to Latium forced our way, nor did the stars our wandering course betray. Willing we sought your shores, and hither bound the port so long desired at length we found. From our sweet homes and ancient realms expelled, great as the greatest that the sun beheld. The god began our line, who rules above, and as our race our king descends from Jove. And hither are we come, by his command, to crave admission in your happy land. How dire a tempest from Mycenae poured, our plains, our temples, and our town devoured. What was the waste of war? What fierce alarm shook Asia's crown from European arms? E'en such have heard, if any such there be, whose earth is bounded by the frozen sea, and such as, born beneath a burning sky, in sultry sun betwixt the tropics lie. From that dire deluge, through the watery waste, such length of years, such various perils past, at last escape to Latium we repair, to beg what you without your want may spare. The common water and the common air, sheds which ourselves will build, and mean abodes, fit to receive and serve our banished gods. Nor our admission shall your realm disgrace, nor length of time our gratitude efface. Besides, what endless honor you shall gain to save and shelter Troy's unhappy train. Now by my sovereign and his fate I swear, renowned for faith and peace, for force and war, oft our alliance other lands desired, and what we seek of you, of us required. Despite not, then, that in our hands we bear these holy boughs, and sue with words of prayer. Fate and the gods by their supreme command have doomed our ships to seek the Latian land. To these abodes our fleet Apollo sends. Here Dardanus was born, and hither tends, where Tuscan Tiber rolls with rapid force, and where Numicus opes his holy source. Besides, our prince presents, with his request, some small remains of what his sire possessed. This golden charger, snatched from burning Troy, Anchises did in sacrifice employ. This royal robe, and this tiara wore old Priam, and this golden scepter bore in full assemblies, and in solemn games. These purple vests were weaved by Dardan dames. Thus while he spoke, Latinus rolled around his eyes, and fixed the while upon the ground. Intent he seemed, and anxious in his breast, not by the scepter moved or kingly vest, but pondering future things of wondrous weight, succession, empire, and his daughter's fate. Okay, so we start the scene in the palace, and when you walk in, it is just a delight to look around. And the monarch is here, all the attendants are there, and the senators walk in. There's these large tables set with meat from the offering, the ram, and then above, ornamented on this portal, is all the godlike grandsires, all of the ancestors of the Latins here. So you have Saturn, you have Italus and Janus. So long story short, a lot of gods and nobles that are glorious in their depiction or doing glorious things. You have Picus with the shield. He was the first king of the Latins. And he was also a diviner, so he has his wand. And he was changed by Circe. She loved him because he was a sorcerer like she was, and she changed him into a bird. And then they look up and they see Latinus. And he wants to know how they got there and why they're there. He knows exactly who they are. Who doesn't know who the Trojans are? And he recalls that Dardanus, the ancestor of the Trojans, is from this soil. And Ilioneus, one of the youths that Aeneid sent out, addresses the king with a lot of grace in his words. And he says, "Oh, we didn't get here by any accident. It wasn't weather. It wasn't anything besides our intention. We've been through a lot. We've been through all of the Trojan War that, of course, you've heard about. And who hasn't heard about it? Everyone from Europe to any place that's frozen to the hottest parts of the earth have heard about the Trojan War. And from that awful place we have been making our way, and we finally are here to ask that you would give us some space to set up our destined home, that we would share the common water and the common air, and we will build in this land our own place that we could get along side by side. And we will never forget, we will never erase the gratitude that we have for you. Line 318. And we'll keep our peace with you, and we are requesting this of you. Remember, required means request in this time. Despite us not, meaning don't treat us with contempt, and we are coming here in peace. And by the way, here's all these gifts. I'm representing Aeneas. He wants to give you this charger, this platter. He wants to give you this royal robe and crown from Priam. And he wants to give you this scepter and these beautiful purple vests from Troy. Well, Latinus hears them, but he's not really thinking about that as he's gazing at the floor. He's thinking about what this means because he's certain that this is the destined people, that Aeneas is the destined one to come to Italy. So he's thinking about succession, about empire, and about Lavinia's fate. Continuing on line 347. On these he mused within his thoughtful mind, and then revolved what Faunus had divined. This was the foreign prince, by fate decreed to share his scepter in Lavinia's bed. This was the race that sure portents foreshewed to sway the world, and land and sea subdue. At length he raised his cheerful head and spoke. The powers, said he, the powers we both invoke, to you and yours and mine propitious be, and firm our purpose with their augury. Have what you ask, your presence I receive, land where and when you please, with ample leave. Partake and use my kingdom as your own. All shall be yours, while I command the crown. And if my wished alliance please your king, tell him he should not send the peace, but bring. Then let him not a friend's embraces fear. The peace is made when I behold him here. Besides this answer, tell my royal guest I add to his commands my own request. One only daughter heirs my crown and state, whom not our oracles, nor heaven, nor fate, nor frequent prodigies permit to join with any native of the Ausonian line. A foreign son-in-law shall come from far, such is our doom, a chief renowned in war, whose race shall bear aloft the Latian name, and through the conquered world diffuse our fame, himself to be the man the fates require. I firmly judge, and what I judge, desire. He said, and then on each bestowed a steed. 300 horses in high stables fed, stood ready, shining all, and smoothly dressed. Of these he chose the fairest and the best to mount the Trojan troop. At his command the steeds caparisoned with purple stand, with golden trappings, glorious to behold, and champ betwixt their teeth the foaming gold. Then to his absent guest the king decreed a pair of coursers born of heavenly breed, who from their nostrils breathed ethereal fire, whom Circe stole from her celestial sire, by substituting mares produced on earth, whose wombs conceived a more than mortal birth. These draw the chariot which Latinus sends, and the rich present to the prince commends. Sublime on stately steeds, the Trojans borne to their expecting lord with peace return. But jealous Juno, from Pacanus' height, as she from Argos took her airy flight, beheld with envious eyes this hateful sight. She saw the Trojan in his joyful train descend upon the shore, desert the main, design a town, and with unhoped success the ambassadors return with promised peace. Then, pierced with pain, she shook her haughty head, sighed from her inward soul, and thus she said, O hated offspring of my Phrygian foes, O fates of Troy which Juno's fates oppose, could they not fall unpitied on the plain, but slain receive and taken scape again? When execrable Troy in ashes lay, through fires and swords and seas they forced their way. Then vanquished Juno must in vain contend, her rage disarmed, her empire at an end. Breathless and tired, is all my fury spent? Or does my glutted spleen at length relent? As if 'twere little from their town to chase, I through the seas pursued their exile race,
engage the heavens, oppose the stormy main, but billows roared and tempests raged in vain. What have my Scyllas and my Syrtes done? When these they overpass and those they shun, on Tiber's shores they land, secure of fate, triumphant o'er the storms and Juno's hate. Mars could in mutual blood the centaurs bathe, and Jove himself gave way to Cynthia's wrath, who sent the tusky boar to Calydon. What great offence had either people done? But I, the consort of the Thunderer, have waged a long and unsuccessful war, with various arts and arms in vain have toiled, and by a mortal man at length am foiled. If native powers prevail not, shall I doubt to seek for needful succour from without? If Jove and heaven my just desires deny, hell shall the power of heaven and Jove supply. Grant that the fates have firmed, by their decree, the Trojan race to reign in Italy. At least I can defer the nuptial day, and with protracted wars the peace delay. With blood the dear alliance shall be bought, and both the people near destruction brought. So shall the son-in-law and father join, with ruin, war, and waste of either line. O fatal maid, thy marriage is endowed with Phrygian, Latian, and Rutulian blood. Bellona leads thee to thy lover's hand. Another queen brings forth another brand, to burn with foreign fires another land. A second Paris, differing but in name, shall fire his country with a second flame. Thus having said, she sinks beneath the ground with furious haste, then shoots the Stygian sound, to rouse Alecto from the infernal seat of her dire sisters and their dark retreat. So all is not well in this section. We start out with Latinus thinking deeply on what his father Faunus had told him in that prophecy prior. He decides these are certainly the men. And he says, the powers that be are blessing us, and I accept your presence, and you can have what you ask. The gods have told me that this would happen, and he goes through the facts that his daughter is supposed to marry someone from outside, and that the outsiders will take on the Italian name and make the Latian name great. And so his only request is that Aeneas be joined to Lavinia in marriage. And then he gives them these fantastic gifts, especially these horses, whom Circe actually stole from Helios. So these are the horses that drove the chariot of the sun, and they are absolutely magnificent. So it seems that peace will out. However, Juno sees what's going on. Jealous Juno, she's called, in 395. And she is very upset that the Trojans are still alive. When execrable Troy in ashes lay, they were the ones that escaped. Execrable meaning dreadful. And what? Should I just relent? I've sent everything at them. I've sent storms. I've sent monsters of different kinds, Scyllas and Syrtes, quicksands. And, why is it when Ares was upset, he could go after the centaurs? When Artemis, Cynthia, was upset, she could go after Calydon by sending this boar, and their offenses weren't even that bad. Look what's happening to me. And if the powers of heaven, if Jove, won't allow me to prevent this monstrous reign of the Trojans, then I'll just have to go to the powers below. And so she forecasts war, blood, and ruin for both the Trojans, the Phrygians, and the Latians and Rutulians, the Italians that are there. She says Bellona, which is the Roman goddess of war, leads thee to thy lover's hand. So this union, this new nation, will be born of blood. And she finishes off this section by going to the underworld, to the Stygian sound, and rousing Alecto, one of the Furies, to do her bidding. Line 453. This Fury, fit for her intent, she chose, one who delights in wars and human woes. E'en Pluto hates his own misshapen race. Her sister Furies fly her hideous face. So frightful are the forms the monster takes, so fierce the hissings of her speckled snakes. Her Juno finds, and thus inflames her spite. O virgin daughter of ethereal night, give me this once thy labour, to sustain my right and execute my just disdain. Let not the Trojans with the feigned pretence of proffered peace delude the Latian prince. Expel from Italy that odious name, and let not Juno suffer in her fame. 'Tis thine to ruin realms, o'erturn estates, betwixt the dearest friends to raise debate, and kindle kindred blood to mutual hate. Thy hands o'er towns and funeral torch displays, and forms 1,000 ills 10,000 ways. Now shake from out thy fruitful beast the seeds of envy, discord, and of cruel deeds. Confound the peace established, and prepare their souls to hatred, and their hands to war. Smeared as she was with black Gorgonian blood, the Fury sprang above the Stygian flood, and on her wicker wings, sublime through night, she to the Latian palace took her flight. There sought the queen's apartment, stood before the peaceful threshold, and besieged the door. Restless Amata lay, her swelling breast fired with disdain for Turnus dispossessed, and the new nuptials of the Trojan guest. From her black bloody locks the Fury shakes her darling plague, the favourite of her snakes. With her full force she threw the poisonous dart, and fixed it deep within Amata's heart, that thus envenomed she might kindle rage, and sacrifice to strife her house and husband's age. Unseen, unfelt, the fiery serpent skims betwixt her linen and her naked limbs, his baleful breath inspiring as he glides. Now like a chain around her neck he rides, now like a fillet to her head repairs, and with his circling volumes folds her hairs. At first the silent venom slid with ease, and seized her cooler senses by degrees. Then ere the infected mass was fired too far, in plaintive accents she began the war, and thus bespoke her husband. Shall, she said, a wandering prince enjoy Lavinia's bed? If nature plead not in a parent's heart, pity my tears and pity her desert. I know, my dearest lord, the time will come you would in vain reverse your cruel doom. The faithless pirate soon will set to sea, and bear the royal virgin far away. A guest like him, a Trojan guest before, in show of friendship sought the Spartan shore, and ravished Helen from her husband bore. Think on a king's inviolable word, and think on Turnus, her once plighted lord. To this false foreigner you give your throne, and wrong a friend, a kinsman, and a son. Resume your ancient care, and if the god your sire and you resolve on foreign blood, know all are foreign in a larger sense, not born your subjects or derived from hence. Then, if the line of Turnus you retrace, he springs from Inachus of Argive race. But when she saw her reasons idly spent, and could not move him from his fixed intent, she flew to rage. From now the snake possessed her vital parts and poisoned all her breast. She raves, she runs with a distracted pace, and fills with horrid howls the public place. Alright, so the Fury arrives. Juno visits the underworld and finds Alecto of the Furies, who loves to create war and discord between people, and she enjoins Alecto to do her bidding. She explains the situation, and she says, you are very good at exactly what I want you to do. You cause discord between realms, and between friends, and between family. And I want you to go and confound the peace that's established, and bring their souls to hatred, and bring their hands to war. Line 475. And the Fury Alecto is all gross with black Gorgonian blood, and she springs up and she goes straight to Queen Amata, who is upset that Turnus is not getting Lavinia like he was supposed to. Because remember, she really likes Turnus. And so she, the Fury Alecto, sends out one of her favorite snakes to plague and poison the mind of Amata, even further. And so the snake glides along and wraps around her neck and then around her head, and then with circling volumes folds her hair. So all over her neck and head and hair, the snake injects his venom. And so Amata, line 501, bespoke her husband, speaks to her husband. Shall a wandering prince enjoy Lavinia's bed? So pretty much just tells him everything that's wrong with this situation. She says, pity my tears and pity her desert. Pity the fact that I hate this, it's tearing me up, and that she's going to leave because of this. Pity that. And this Trojan is going to be just like Paris. So Aeneas is set up as a second Paris here. Paris came and stole Helen from Sparta in pretense of peace. What do you think this Trojan's going to do? Exactly the same thing. And think about Turnus, the one formerly pledged to marry her. And you're going to wrong him if you do this as well. And by the way, if you think about it, you have these prophecies that Lavinia is supposed to marry a foreigner, but aren't we all foreigners? None of us really came from here, and Turnus especially. He is actually descended from the first king of Argos, Inachus. And it doesn't work. Latinus is stable and steady-minded, and he will not be persuaded. And so Amata flies into a rage, poisoned further by the snake, and she goes and fills the public places with howls, which is where we left off and where we'll finish this part.